I've also seen you speak before about believing that the armed forces and military is a man's job, and then completely changing your perspective and now starting uh, a force of rangers that are women only.
Not necessarily the military. The units I was a part of, they were exclusively for men, whether being for the diving branch or being with special operations. Whether I liked it or not, or whether we wanted it or not, uh, it was a man's job. I remember when I was part of the diving branch, we had a university come and do studies on us, trying to develop basically a rollout plan for women to be able to get into the branch. And it's a locker room vote amongst the lads. We'd rather make our standards harder to get into this unit than work alongside women. And this is just purely ego.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's purely ego, And then, I've built a career now across 3 continents in training men, breaking them down just like I was broken down, and rebuilding them into what we need for frontline deployment. And I never worked with women once, never deployed with a woman once. I'm never part of a training program I put together or delivered, never part of an operation or a mission that I ran. And so in 2017, when we started looking at alternate models to what we'd been doing, and what we were doing was the same shit that I'd done my whole life. I was just replicating something that worked in a military sense, in a conservation sense. Why not? I didn't have anything else to go off. And I came into conservation at a time when it was becoming increasingly militarized as the rhino wars were starting, and seeing 35,000 elephants a year being killed for their tusks, for their ivory. And I fitted the mold perfectly. So I came in at the right time for me and just did what I knew. And then 2017, trying to change things, trying to look at different models, how we can shift things up or sideways or whatever it may be, but just not keep doing the same thing and expecting a different or a better outcome. And at the time, as an industry, I think if we were getting it right, the situation would have been much better. We were looking at other industries that were getting ahead by getting more women on the boards, more women as CEOs, more women in management. Conservation was essentially in the Stone Ages. Women in frontline positions are outnumbered by men at a ratio of somewhere between 70 and 100 to 1. So there's a lot of women that are in, either on checkpoints or sitting on gates or walking fences. They're not doing the actual job. They're not given the opportunity to do the full range of jobs and skills that a man would do. And so that means they don't get the opportunity to gain the experience needed to be able to rise up and go into a management position. And so if they're not able to do that in an industry where to be a manager, you need to have that full range of experience, because when shit goes south very quickly and people's lives are in your hands, and the decisions you make, you need to be able to make the right one. And if you don't have that wealth of experience, you can't make it. And so from that standpoint, we're getting left behind. And I looked at other organizations that were involving women. It was very sort of tokenist. Women were given a weapon and a uniform, and they get the pictures holding the rifle for social media or whatever, or fundraising. And so that sort of undermined the women in terms of them being used in that way. It undermined the men that were actually doing the job, that the women were being put forward as the sort of the poster. And so I've got all these things going around in my head. I've got my background, and just my thought process in going down this path was completely against everything that had been ingrained in me throughout my military career and operational career in Iraq and everything I've done in conservation so far. And the final, I suppose, and we were discussing this as an organisation at the time. We were going around, saying, maybe we should try this, and how would we do it? And it was sort of getting a bit of pushback, and even me, I was sort of on the fence. And then I was actually on a speaking tour, and I was in New York at the time, and I read an article in the New York Times about the US Army Rangers training women in preparation for frontline deployment, and that was significant for the average reader. That was significant as a step in terms of US military deployments. For me, it was a bit more personal. Almost to the month, a decade before reading that article, I was in northern Baghdad, and we were on a mission heading north, and then so our convoy got hit coming through a checkpoint. There's a few people killed at the checkpoint. We quickly surrounded. So I had a Dushka anti-aircraft gun held to my head. I mean, we were fucked. So it's like this is it. I was actually like in the vehicle with my best mate. We're in a 4-vehicle convoy. They're trying to pull guys out of the first vehicle. It's like, fuck, what the fuck? This is it. And the US Army Rangers came in and got us out and got us back to the nearest forward operating base. Got us back there safely. And reading that article in New York, I thought, well, if that unit that fucking got my ass out of the shit that time is now training and deploying women like this, then maybe women should be wildlife rangers as well, not just US Army Rangers. And that's where the start of this program came from.
That's amazing. Well, so I've also heard you speak on your belief that women are very like defensive and protective of, we know that, female dogs are very protective of their offspring, and and bears over the cubs. The mama bear. It's a common term used. So basically, I guess what I want to say is you work with only female rangers in your.
We started this program and we started the organization in 2009. It wasn't until 2017 in August that we started the first trial. So we had to negotiate with the chiefs, the traditional leaders, local council, to do this program. It's a very patriarchal society. In their eyes, a woman's job is with the family in the fields. It's definitely not being a wildlife ranger. Being an armed wildlife ranger, one of the toughest and most respected jobs, one of the most dangerous jobs, and demanding. And there was a lot of pushback initially, and we had to negotiate. We eventually got given a 72-hour window to put them through selection, and we had to condense down what we would have done in the military into 72 hours, which happened to be longer than we would have done with the men. But we had to find a balance between having enough time to prove this program, but to put the women through tougher selection process than the men, because in the eyes of everyone, they had so much more to prove. So we normally would just do a basic 24-hour selection for the men and be able to figure out who the guys are going to be to go on course. So we made it 72 hours with the women, 3 times longer. The chiefs, they were happy. I said 72 hours. And basically that was our time to fail, or the window of opportunity for the women to fail. And they fucking blew it out of the water. They were just tough as nails. And so all the women that we selected, the criteria were survivors of serious sexual assault, domestic violence, AIDS, orphans, single mothers, and abandoned wives. And there was no particular reason behind that other than I'm an Aussie, and like you guys, we like to fight for the underdog. So if this program goes anywhere and people get a job after it, then let's give it to the people that need it the most. And that was the women in these communities that come from that particular background. So very quickly it went from the women having to prove themselves to us as instructors, regrouping and say, this is going to happen. This shit's real, and these women are going to go live in an area that had lost 8,000 elephants in the previous 16 years prior to their arrival. So we 8,000 times teams of armed men had come into an area willing to kill elephants or anything standing in their way. And we were about to start up this program that started to get a lot of media attention and send women out there into harm's way. And so that's we started the training program, put what initially was 16 women through the course. We now have there's 240 staff. All our rangers and all our scouts are women. We've scaled from 1 reserve. We have 8 reserves now right across the Zambezi Valley. We're in the process of moving into a second entire region, which itself is a massive, huge landscape spanning over 250 miles, similar to the landscape we have in Zimbabwe. And so we're on target now. We should have around 1,000 women by 2026, 2025, 2026.